So if you could just start off by kind of introducing yourself and telling us a bit about yourself and what you do at the moment.
Sure. I'm Marian. I am 25. I'm an archaeologist based here in Australia. I do the chemistry side of archaeology. So I started off in the more traditional commercial sector. In Australia, we have a lot of consultancy with the mining companies and Indigenous archaeology. But I found myself drawn to the geochemistry side of it, to the dating, to that kind of that. So I decided to pursue a master's in it, which I did, and I worked in France. And then I liked it so much that I decided to do a PhD, which I'm doing now. And I'm more looking at extinction events now of megafauna.
So you're doing a PhD in geoscience, is that correct? So is that kind of geophysics, kind of a fancy geophysics type thing? Because I'm not
Yeah,
too
I
sure
mean,
what it means. So
yeah, well, geoscience tends to mean the chemistry side of it. And actually, a lot of the time, people who do geoscience are sort of looking at rare metals in, say, water pollutants or in farming and agriculture and um, bushfire regeneration and toxic metals within the ground and soils. What I'm doing in geoscience is looking at isotopes in teeth. So, geoscience, geophysics is a part of it. You could say that in geoarchaeology, we have the four geos: geomatics, geochemistry, geophysics, and geology, I guess.
yeah,
But geology is its own kind of thing.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause in some of your pictures, it looked like you were like pushing those geophysics machines.
Yeah.
So I
That
thought,
that's what I did in the commercial sector. Yeah.
oh right, okay. You're doing your PhD. Are you working as well at the moment in commercial? Then you said,
No,
or
I was going to, but I tell you what, I didn't realize how busy a PhD would be.
oh, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. Luckily, I have a scholarship to do the PhD, so I don't have to work. I do some commercial work in the labs, um, but yeah, mostly just
yeah.
the PhD now.
Because my friend is doing a PhD on smells in archaeology. So like the smells of uh mummified tissue and stuff like this, and
Whoa.
kind of getting. I don't know what she. Yeah, it's the first thing of her type of subject, and but she's been working in commercial archaeology with me as a field archaeologist. So
Hmm.
I don't know how she finds the time to do it,
That's
but,
intense.
but yeah. And I think she's taking samples from sites that we're doing as well, for smell samples and all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, she's a crazy lady to be honest. But
That's hardcore.
so yeah, how did you kind of get into this realm of archaeology then?
Um, I think because, in high school, I was always very much humanities driven, but I kind of had this secret love for science, but I was terrible at maths, like I still can't do it at all. And so I had this like secret love for chemistry that was never going to happen because I couldn't do mathematics. And
Mm,
then I went to uni and I tried out a few things and tried archaeology. And I realized it was this amazing combination of science and humanities where actually it didn't really matter if you couldn't do maths because the science was all like theoretical. It kind of put it all into this narrative that anyone could understand. Um, and then as I get older, I think as most people do, you tend to find things a bit easier. And so I
yeah.
started getting a little bit better at maths. But I also discovered that you can just program. You can learn to program things to do the maths for you. So
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, I realized that that was no longer a barrier to me doing science, but I loved archaeology so much, I decided I wanted to combine them. And that's when I was looking for master's programs where I could do that kind of the archaeometry or the science of archaeology. And I found one and I found a supervisor there who was looking for students. And yeah, we decided to do a master's looking at all these bovid teeth from sites in France and Israel that had been associated with Neanderthals or with Homo erectus. And I did like this sort of broad scale isotope analysis on all the teeth, looking across time and seeing how their behavior changed in response to climate change and would that have, say, had an impact on the hunting behaviors of those hominins? And so I just realized you could take science and turn it into this amazing humanities narrative. So
yeah, and my maths is terrible as well. So,
oh yeah,
like,
I like calculator for the most basic things.
yeah. So have you always been interested in the scientific area of archaeology? Did it start off as like a child, or did you like, how did it kind of start?
No, I think it was actually the first tutorial paper we got assigned in my first archaeology unit at uni. I had no idea you could do science in archaeology. My perspective of archaeology, at least growing up in Australia, was like Aboriginal rock art for one thing, and then it was like Greek and Roman stuff over there in Europe, far away from us. Um, and I think time team was the extent of what I knew about archaeology.
Yeah, a lot of people say.
So yeah, I kind of had this image of archaeologists sort of emerging fully fledged with a beard and a hat. That was my image of it. And then we got this like tutorial paper, and it was like, I think it was called the mitochondrial DNA of 3,000-year-old chickens from Vanuatu. And I read this and I was like, mind blown. I had no idea that you could do this kind of thing in archaeology. And that was it. I'm like, okay, I'm sold. That's what I want to do.
So you're from Australia then? Have you always lived in Australia? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been around the world on trips doing other excavations or using your scientific work elsewhere? Have you been around the world doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I've been like super lucky. I went to Venice. We did like this mass exhumation of victims from the Black Death.
But yeah,
Yeah, it was
that
wicked. I
sounds
mean, it
cool.
was like, yeah, I mean, it was pretty. I didn't realize how like much it would hit you when you start seeing all these skeletons. Like, and we started, trying to age them, figure out, were they male or female. And like, I remember we got this one skeleton and we figured out it was like a 17-year-old kid. And I just like, I was like, oh no. I was like, oh my God, my heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know. I've kind of worked all over the place. Excavations around France.
Mm.
Kind of gone back and forth a bit. I spent 3 months in Greece. I was working at a geophysics lab there for a while. Got to sort of get involved in all the projects. Cambodia, spent some time there, which was pretty awesome. Yeah, it kind of just Spain as well, England, of course.
Yeah.
But Australia, I mean, it's so big. You
Yeah.
spend part of your time up the northern part of Western Australia, and then you go into like the middle of South Australia, and it's 4,000 kilometers apart, and totally different landscapes, totally
Yeah.
different cultural groups, and did like shipwreck archaeology. And then you go up north and you're looking at this like interaction between like indigenous people and Malaysian people from the 17th century. And
Mm.
yeah, it's awesome.
So I guess, I mean, the only experience I've had in archaeology is in Italy or England. So I don't have much of a experience of like other countries just yet. But because I'm guessing in Australia it's quite different, the archaeology. And I guess you said you did a lot of caves and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
what
most
kind
of
of
that.
find there?
A lot of the time with the caves, because a lot of the rock art is in the caves.
Oh yeah.
And then it's also they're kind of like really good places for settlement. So you find like the fires and refuse, and sometimes you'll even find skeletal remains, which is like in Australia anyway, it's like a really big deal. I mean, it's like they're quite sacred and you really shouldn't disturb them.
Mm.
So you have to be quite careful if you come across them, and like you don't want to disturb them at all. But they are a really great place, especially for the rock art. You can get these amazing dates off them, which kind of shows this like incredible history of human occupation, back 60 odd thousand years, which is
That's amazing. Yeah, I love it's the handprint where they used to blow the minerals on the hands and leave
yeah,
a handprint, and I think that's really fascinating. Like, and
amazing.
how they thought of that idea and how how they used it.
There's this
Um,
area in the northern part of Western Australia, Maharaja National Park, and I think it was like my first field school actually in archaeology, and we went there and we just surveyed like this 200-meter valley, and we found like 5,000 petroglyphs in like the 200-meter area. And I should say, like, these petroglyphs, you know, that like when they're in stone, these rocks are some of the hardest in the world, and they've been like etched in like these amazing intricate designs, and that whole area has like over 2 million motifs, like the whole national park. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you said you've been to the UK. What kind of stuff have you done in the UK?
The UK was more lab-based stuff. So there's the what's it called? It's a lab in Oxford with Julia Lee Thorpe. It's like bioarchaeology, I guess. She does like a lot of isotope work. So we're working together on some work from Israel. So I got to go do that, I guess. And conferences mainly. Just try to get over to all the little conferences and hang out.
So you said about teeth. Was it animal teeth or human teeth that you're like kind of looking into?
Well, that's the interesting question, isn't it, with these ones? They're hominoid, I guess. So they're that primate teeth.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah. So they're kind of, in terms of our direct ancestors, we split off about 11 million years from these guys. They're more closely related to the orangutan, but that's kind of new information up until about 2019. We weren't really sure, because I look at Gigantopithecus, just for context. We weren't really necessarily sure where they fit in the evolutionary timescale. People sort of guessed, but because all that's left of them is their teeth and then like 3 mandibles, it's kind of hard to tell. But then Frido Velker, who's one of Max Planck's, I think in Leipzig, he did this proteomic research and was able to directly pin them down to the Pongo line. So that was, I think, last year. It was pretty amazing. I think the first time it's been done, really.
That's awesome. So what kind of stuff have you been working on, or what's your kind of subject in your I know your PhD is in this type of study, but what have you been working on recently?
Well, no, it's cool. It's cool. What I'm kind of working on at the moment is like, I'm trying to figure out, what I really want to know is like the early life point of these animals. So, you know, with like humans and stuff, we really have a good idea of when babies stop breastfeeding, you know, in the weaning points. And we know that with like Pongo, with orangutans, with some other primates, but we have absolutely no clue about any of the early life ways or behaviors of Gigantopithecus. And those early days or early years really give like all the information you want to know about an animal, because how long they stay with their mothers, you know, the sexual dimorphism, like are the males of the species moving further out, which we know happens with orangutans? Are they staying closer into, you know, their little family groups? We really want to know what drove them to an extinction event. Why were they so different to the other primates that didn't go extinct? Because the Gigantopithecus is the only primate to have gone extinct in the last like 2.3 million years. So I really want to look at those behaviors. And so at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm taking the teeth and I'm running a combination of oxygen and carbon analysis on them. So I'm looking for the oxygen, I'm looking a bit at the mobility of them. The carbon, I'm looking a bit at their diet. I'm doing trace element maps across the entire teeth. So I'm seeing, are there big stress lines in the teeth? Do we have like, you know, changes in the amount of lead there? You know, what I want to see any interaction with the environment that may have caused a problem for these animals, which we can see using trace elements. And then I'm also doing things like strontium isotope work. So again, really looking at that mobility. Were they really mobile when they were younger, or did they wait until they got older? Like, what was their behaviors with their mothers and their family groups? That's kind of what I'm looking at, really trying to get that holistic picture.
It's crazy how much information you can get from just a tooth.
I know, they're nuts.
It's crazy. So
Yeah, it tells you everything.
So, what are your plans kind of after your PhD, and what do you want to kind of get into? Was that an unknown?
No, it's I say that I have so many ideas, but sometimes, you look at the state of academia at times and you go, do I want to kind of step my toe into that?
Yeah,
Um, you think about job security and everything. In an ideal world, I mean, I'd love to stay in research, right? I'd love to kind
yeah,
of work my
yeah,
way up through the university system. Do I think that's terribly likely at the moment? I'll try. The skills that I'm learning with this PhD, because it's so heavy with like instrumentation, like mass spectrometers, it is, I guess, transferable enough that I could work in like the industry sector as well, although perhaps not in archaeology. I'd like to stay in archaeology, but I'm open to being available for any kind of work. I think you can't be too picky at the moment.
No.
But
No.
it's, yeah, I'd also love to get into like paleopathology, bring in that medicine side of it and kind of look at ancient diseases and
That's cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I worked on a child cemetery in Italy where we had children that
Oh,
died of malaria, and you could see where the disease has eaten away at their eye sockets, and
yeah,
that was crazy to also find child skeletons and baby skeletons, as well as seeing how
that's
how they
intense.
died. So yeah, how has the coronavirus affected your PhD or work?
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah, my whole PhD kind of changed in the middle of the year really. I was supposed to have I guess I was doing like a really big ecological reconstruction of Southeast Asia as well. And then with all the borders shut, like a lot of people, all the excavations stopped, and those samples that I was going to be getting and working on not weren't around. So that we kind of had to change tactic a bit, which it's okay. It's kind of
Yeah.
part of a PhD, I guess. And then of course we had like a lockdown here, not like the UK, unfortunately, just having a second lockdown.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was pretty strict, and it lasted for a few months where I am in New South Wales. So I couldn't kind of go into the lab at all. Um, and then because I am like learning a lot of these techniques, I was supposed to be in Germany for a few months to learn a bit more.
yeah,
So that's, I guess, all been moved. Field work's been moved.
yeah,
That
yeah,
it's not the end of the world. I mean, I'll apply for an extension and
yeah.
I'll get it. Touch wood. But
You would have thought
certainly
so.
been a
You would
change.
have thought they would extend it if
I feel
the
like it would be
pandemic.
hard to argue, right?
Yeah.
Like global pandemic.
Has it got any better though during the?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean over here, like don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but we've had like we've recorded no new cases in the whole of
Right.
Australia for a while. And all the new cases have been like return travelers that are in quarantine. So kind of life for us is pretty
Sounds like
good, to be honest.
sounds a
Yeah.
lot better than it is in the UK right now.
Yeah, everyone's being super, super strict still. Like our campus is empty. You have to apply to be on campus to
Right.
work in the labs. Like you have to show that you need to be there. You have to work like in separate days. I can't work with someone else in my lab because it's too small. So everyone's still really strict about it,
Yeah.
but like heaps of freedoms compared to some other
Compared to
places.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you've worked in commercial.
Mm,
How have you found working in commercial? Like, what's the pros and cons of working in that kind of area? Because that's my main experience is
mm,
working in commercial archaeological companies, and it does have its pros and cons. A lot
yeah.
more cons, I think, than pros. So,
Yeah.
what's your experience kind of been?
Well, I think, I don't know, Australia is kind of perhaps kind of unique in its reliance on the mining sector in a way. And so a lot of the archaeology that I did was very much like salvage rescue archaeology before companies came in and blew it
Yeah,
all up. So you tended to be working on a strict deadline, and you were trying to map out and do like big surveys of large scale sites. In Australia everything is like really big, right?
hmm,
and you'd say, oh no, like in this section that we've mapped out for you of like, I don't know, 500 square k's or something, actually there's like 3 sacred sites over here just on the edge, so can you maybe move your stuff just this way a little bit? And we'd write up the report, explain why, you know, these were significant, and then if they wanted, they just blow it up anyway, because to be honest, the consequences are so small for these big companies. It's really kind of depressing, to be honest. And yeah, of course, there's areas of archaeology in Australia that are don't do that. Like historical archaeology is, but you know, historical archaeology for Australia is like 200 years old. It's not it's not like super exciting because we kind of have a record of where it all came from. So we all like, oh, this bottle, yep, England.
Yeah.
We're like, the motherland. So you know, the Indigenous archaeology is where the real interesting stuff is, but it's also constantly under threat. So unless you're part of a big university research project, you're doing this like really quick rescue archaeology where you're just mapping it all down, writing it all down, because it's probably going to be destroyed, which is just, it got to me. I was like,
I have found that it seems that archaeology is not important to some people, like especially like building contractors. They just want you in and out as soon as possible. I was working on the 7th Roman vineyard in the UK, and the person who, well, I was in charge of the site, but the person who was the main contractor, he just didn't give a hoot about like the archaeology, and he wanted me out in 3 weeks, and it was a massive site that really needed probably a good 2 months or 3 months to, you know, fully excavate. And it was continuing down the field, and he just started building already, and I was like, you know, you can't do this. And you know, it just seems that, you know, it doesn't seem to be that important to some people, and that's like, if that's the 7th Roman vineyard in the country, then surely it's more important, you know.
That's amazing. Like, who I want to know about that, you know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we didn't find many finds, obviously, because it was just where they were growing stuff. But, you know, to try and get pollen samples and to see what they were growing and what type of grape they were growing or whatever they were growing, would have been great. But
and you think about how much, you know, like governments and say the entertainment industry effectively profits off of archaeology. You know, a lot of these finds and research is done, and then, oh, you want to use it for tourism, great, and oh, we're going to make whole movies about it. But the reality is, a lot of the time it's like, yeah, you come in, okay, quickly you can map and do your thing, but get out because we need to build.
Yeah, basically. That's what that's what I found with commercial. You know, they just, obviously mainly it's for builders who want to build something and want to do it quickly, and they want you, you know, out as soon as possible. But you come across something amazing, like we did this Roman kind of domestic living kind of rural site, and there was just tons of stuff there. I mean, it was mainly kind of like enclosure ditches and kind of living activity, kind of Iron Age and Roman merged together, and there was just tons of pottery and finds. And then we started finding like a working surface, like a cobbled surface, and we didn't have enough people, and I was complaining that we need more people to get this job done in time, and they just never did. So there was like 3 or 4 of us on this huge site, and it was just ridiculous. I mean, I found cremations towards like the last week of the deadline, and I had to kind of do a cremation every day, like per day, just to get them out and recorded. And it was it's proper sad, you know, because that has so much stuff that needs to be done still. I just like feel like I want to go back to site at night and just do it myself.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's proper sad. What's your favorite period of history and why?
You know, I think probably for me, my love is in human evolution. And so I don't particularly like the word prehistory. So I would say, for me, I really like the Middle Pleistocene personally, which is that kind of period of where you're seeing that combination of like Neanderthals and Homo erectus and Homo sapiens sort of coming in and converging all together. And it's like this big mishmash of all the Homo species, and you see that amazing kind of connection, but then the dying out. Like you had the Homo floresiensis, or the sort of the Hobbit people, I guess you could say, in Flores and Indonesia, and they were there during that time as well, but they obviously went extinct too. And you had the Dremelen in South Africa, although they're a bit older, but it's still that. I love that period of time where you had all these different species evolving, and then just Homo sapiens left. It's like, what? What?
Yeah, that's always confused me. Like how, I mean, I've not really looked into that type of archaeology, but I always find it fascinating. Then obviously seeing in museums the skulls and stuff like that. But yeah, my knowledge of that area is lit like that. So
I'm like the bad archaeologist at parties though, because people do that. They're like, "Oh, tell me about like the ancient Greeks," and I'm like, I don't know.
do you think there's anything important in archaeology that needs to be said that hasn't been said? Like, for instance, the Georgina, who I interviewed the other day, she mentioned that women's history is not mentioned enough, which I found to be true. She's told me something that I didn't realize or know about. So, do you have anything that you think hasn't been raised or said enough?
Oh, I'm sure lots of things. I mean, yeah, like you say, like women's history, like hidden histories, right?
Yeah,
I think a big part as well that hasn't really been looked at is like queer history within archaeology, like the LGBTQIA plus representation in archaeology. And you think maybe it's not there, but it is. Like you see it in rock art dating back 30,000 years. You see this split of genders, and you see like it's interwoven throughout its history, but mainstream archaeology,
yeah,
like it's not really taught. I don't think you maybe get a few papers like, okay, read this, like this queer reading of this, and you're like,
yeah.
oh, okay. Anyway, I'm not sure what you got up to, but yeah, yeah.
I think you said about you just been given a paper and saying read this.
Yeah, I just think like a lot of the time it's a bit of lip service. Like you don't really get those in-depth like understandings when you consider how many people in the world identify as LGBT. I think it's quite likely there was a fairly solid proportion of people throughout history who have, and I'm not sure that we see that represented in archaeology so much.
No, I mean, I do find that as well. I mean, with some commercial companies, they seem to run like they're in the 1970s, and they don't like. It's usually like old men who, just like live in the 1970s archaeology. Like you watch Old Time
Yeah,
Team, it's like kind of like
yeah,
that. And I've
yeah.
had to deal with like sexism and racism.
Oh yeah.
It's like it's so like it's the 21st century. We're not living in the 60s anymore. And
Yeah.
I mean,
I saw this classic example. It was like, I can't remember what it was, like this grave was dug up and it was the two skeletons were like facing each other and they were both identified to most probably be remains of women. And like the resultant paper was like friends buried together. And I'm like, really? Do you think like
it's like they say there's no such thing as like women warriors back then, even though they find female skeletons with like weapons and offerings
yeah,
like
yeah,
Anglo-Saxon women. And even in Time Team, I think Tony Robinson said, but it's a woman. Why would that be a warrior or something? It's like, and then someone was like snapped at him and was like, they were warriors back then who were women, you idiot.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that's also not spoken about that much. Is like female warriors, and you don't see that as much as like men being portrayed as this hero and as Viking or
Yeah.
soldier.
And
But I
actually, the
mean,
whole hunter-gatherer narrative as well is like we had like the Man the Hunter came out in like the 1960s, I guess, and it's been refuted quite soundly through mass amounts of evidence over the last few decades that actually this manhunt, woman gather is really a very not a good representation at all of what was probably happening.
No, I mean, with like the Romans, of how like how erotic they were with painting things of sexual things and like not penises everywhere.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I mean, obviously, I think they were probably more open sexually, but I've not really seen much about it. If it like the queer side of it, or so. I mean, they probably were, and they probably were quite open about it. But you don't hear much about it. But yeah, I would agree with you there as well. Okay, well, thank you for doing this with me, and
Oh no, thank you.
but yeah, well, thanks a lot for doing that. It's been nice speaking to you, and
Oh, you too. It's so nice to like talk to other, archaeologists from all over.
oh,
It's
definitely.
like, yeah, I really hadn't done much on Instagram, and then I like actually started trying to find other archaeologists, and I was like, whoa.
It's surprising actually. A lot of people I've spoken to on Instagram have also been wanting to start like a community of archaeologists, like to talk to each other and stuff like that. And I mean, the reason I'm doing this is just to kind of meet other people around the world and kind of get their experiences and learn more. And also trying to merge my filmmaking into archaeology as well.
Yeah.
Because I did actually studied filmmaking at uni. I didn't study archaeology, so
That's so cool.
so yeah, that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. I'm hoping to do some kind of like documentaries and stuff like that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Like time team style. I have to get like each character, like I'll have to get a wig and short
Yeah.
get a southern accent.
That's right. Yeah.